allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here. Mr. Holmes.
Here.
Mr. Christopher. Dr. Merritt.
Here.
Mr. Dorr.
Here.
Here. Mr. Pratt.
Here.
I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Mr. Holmes, second. Ms. Bird, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, we have the comments from the public. We have one this evening. Mr. Knopf, a reminder to please keep it 3 minutes or under.
Excuse me.
There's water bottles back there.
I'm sorry.
Clock's been running like, no, just kidding.
Probably. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much, members of the Board of Education. My name is Arne C. Dinoff. I'm the District Public Advocate, County Public Advocate, and I'm also running for the United States Congress. And there's a couple things on the agenda that I would like to discuss. First of all, I know that you have a time limit, and unfortunately, you strictly adhere to it. And I think there's a lot of information and a lot of caring people in our district that want to bring forth information. And as I discussed with other board members before the meeting, the state legislature that I testify regularly on a weekly basis, sometimes tri-weekly basis, the committees of the Missouri House of Representatives and the Missouri Senate give me unlimited amount of time. And when I talk about the bills and information and do public testimony, I testify between 5 and 15 minutes, and then sometimes there's a lot of questions, and sometimes it goes to 45 minutes to an hour. So I'd like this board to look at extending the time, because 3 minutes is really too short to get your information and your point across. On your agenda is the ethics a mandate by Missouri state statute to file an annual requirement of ethics and disclosure. And so currently we have a couple board members that aren't following by the rules, not playing by the rules. We have one board member for sure that has a contract from the school district and is profiting in terms of commissions. And to this date, it still hasn't been disclosed to the Missouri Ethics Commission on the financial disclosure report. And I think it's getting high time, if that person doesn't comply with the law fully, that there needs to be a complaint made to the Missouri Ethics Commission, and we need an investigation to be jointly done by the State Attorney General. I believe in transparency and accountability and responsibility of board members, that if you're going to run for public office, that you shouldn't be making profits off of the backs of students and patrons. We also have another board member who also may have a potential conflict and has not reported it to the Missouri Ethics Commission. And I ask you to dig deep, that you vote in terms of not voting yes or no, but you abstain in voting if one of your friends has a contract before the district. And I've asked this board time and time again to disclose, like all other school districts and political subdivisions across St. Charles County and across our region, divulge and put in the meeting packet all the contracts, all the bidding processes, all the public documents, and you refuse to do that. And I think that our construction manager, our assistant person in charge of construction facilities, they have an obligation, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to comply with the law and disclose that information. So if you have a friend that's getting a profit from our school district on the backs of our children and our patrons, I ask you abstain and vote no, and not vote yes or no. When it comes to the St. Peter's SOR partnership agreement, we have county positions, or 17 positions that are funded by the St. Charles County Police that are 100% funded. I think that these subdivisions and the population is created by the municipalities. They have an obligation to protect our children and make sure that our families and employees are safe. And I would ask that we ask the city of St. Peter's and O'Fallon to provide school resource officers free of charge 100% on their dime and their general budget. Thank you.
Next, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion.
Mr. Pratt, second please. Mr. Christopher, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, we have financial reports.
Good afternoon, or good evening. Thanks for having me. So kind of fun for me. It's my first time up here. I try not to rush through it. So, we finished last year very well. We focused mostly on the summary and then talk about our operating funds in particular. Those are the general and teacher fund combined. That's the metric DESE uses to judge our financials. The other funds are the bond, which, money comes in, we pay out the bond, and then the actual bond projects. So the operating is more, day-to-day teacher salary, business office, bus drivers, things like that. Anyway, the operating fund increased by $12 million over the last fiscal year. That's really a reflection, we're seeing that in other districts too, of the one-time funding from like ESSERS and COVID. We as a district did the smart thing, we didn't spend that money on ongoing expenses, which did help us raise our fund reserve. And as Jeff talked about last month, in the future years, we're not going to have those one-time funds, so our budget is a lot closer to break even going forward. But it's great that we increased our operating balance so much while we could. Our fund balance is now 28.4% of expenditures. So that means we have roughly $72 million in our operating fund balance. Our total expenditures are closer to, sorry, I had it before, 250 million. So you look at it, that's where the 28% comes from. That's important for a cash flow perspective because we get a lot of our funds from taxes in December and July. Having a balance over, it's 22-25% allows us to not borrow just for operating funds. This is a really great place to be because who wants to waste money on interest just to pay for your ongoing operations, which is fairly common for property tax funded entities. And then cash and investments, we had total fund balances of $129.9 million at the end of the year. Our total cash and investments, if you add up all of our bank accounts, was $134.5 million. The reason why it's higher, which is of course where we want it to be, is we have two funds, the self-insured health plan and another fund for reserve for property insurance. Those are considered proprietary funds. They're not part of what we report to DESE, but they are an important part of our operations. That's just why we have more money than it shows in those funds. Revenues in total, not just operating funds, finished 1.36 million higher than budgeted. That's the reason why it was so much higher than budgeted, or not that much higher than budgeted, was we were able to do adjustments during the year. Otherwise, it was much higher than our original budget. The next chart just kind of breaks it out by source, which I always think is interesting. Our district, we are 64% of our money is from local sources, and then the next biggest is state. That's what you see, with most districts, but I always like to point out local. That's our taxpayers, and that's how we're funded primarily. Normally, if you see that 64 local and 5% federal, when there's less federal money coming in, the local would be higher, the federal would be less. It's just a reflection of this year, probably 3-4% in future years. So, as I said, property tax is the biggest one. Our investment earnings are considered local. The Prop C, which is our share of sales taxes, student activities, things like that, that's what makes up that local revenue. And then a little farther on that third page, you can see our operating revenues increased 5.5% from last year. Really huge jump, 14.5 million, or 14 million altogether. 14.5 of that was from local. That's interest being a lot higher than we thought it would be. And additionally, state transportation and property taxes were a lot higher than they were last year, which is, good. We took that money, that extra money, essentially that 14 million in additional revenue. Most of that went right into our fund balance. It was great. And then I just made it, there's a table on there that shows our top sources of revenue. As you'd expect, property tax was our biggest one, accounting for 46% of total revenues. Most years it's probably closer to 50% when we don't have these one-time federal funds coming in. And then the next biggest source of the district revenue is basic formula from the state. There's two, there's the classic classroom trust and then the basic formula. These numbers here just combine the two because they both are basic formula at the end of the day. Sale of bonds was our third biggest this year. That doesn't normally happen. And then Prop C is our third most years. And then you can kind of see after that, those are all revenues that make up over 5, double-digit % of our total revenue. And then after that, it gets a lot smaller. So even something like interest earnings, which increased 5 million, that's only 2.6 of our budget. And of that 5 million increase, 3 million was in our operating funds alone. So Jeff and Janice do a really good job of aggressively investing with MOSIP and MOCAP. They're the allowable investments we can have. And we're moving money there. We have a little extra in our bank account, let's move it over there. We just keep the minimum in our operating bank account, and the rest is used to invest, which is why we had such an impressive return on our money this year. Now for expenses, expenses were right. They finished under budget, 42.8 million, but when you just look at operating funds, it was really close, 1.36 million under budget, and that's a reflection of our ability to do budget adjustments throughout the year. You know, we come to you and we say, hey, this is how much we're actually going to spend, let's adjust the budget. So you would expect expenditures to be pretty close to budget at the end of the year. Operating expenses increased by 7% overall. The largest section of that increase was salaries and benefits. We had to make our pay more competitive to attract the right staff for our students. And additionally, benefits, they just increased with salaries. Most of our benefits, when you say that, you might think health insurance, dental, vision. It's about half our benefit cost. The other half is the state pension, which is directly tied to salaries, and then FICA, Social Security and Medicare, for those that have Social Security, and that's tied directly to salaries as well. So your salaries go up, your benefits are gonna go up. Salaries in total are 63% of operating spend. Of that, 80% goes to certified staff. That's a good ratio. The remainder is support staff, paraprofessional, bus drivers, business office, et cetera. As I said, benefits are the next highest, 21, so 84%. I can remember probably 15 years ago, you'd look at these numbers, it was closer to 75 to 80% is where everyone was sitting. A lot of districts now are in that 80 to 90% range for salary and benefits combined. That's just a reflection of what we do, and it's funded by people. And then, short of any other quotes, I just wanted to say these are preliminary. They haven't been audited yet. But we know there's going to be some minor changes, nothing with a big ending number. We'll present that after the audit comes through next month. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you.
All right, if you have any more questions, I need a motion to approve the financial reports as presented in front of you. Mr. Helms, second. Mr. Christopher, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, good job. Next, we have old business.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. First item under old business is a conflict of interest ordinance. This is policy BDFA. As noted here, we do this every 2 years as required by the Missouri Ethics Commission. The only thing really to note is that the language in the policy does not change. So this is the existing language. It just has to be reaffirmed every 2 years. And so I'm bringing it forward to ask your approval of that in accordance with the requirement. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No.
All right. If not, I need a motion to approve the conflict of interest ordinance policy BBFA as presented. Dr. Marion, second. Ms. Byrd, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
All right, the next item is probably the bulk of our meeting tonight. This is the CSIP update. This is our year update and our quarterly update. So I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough here to kind of set the stage for everybody. What you have available online and in your packets are two versions of the CSIP report. There is the comprehensive global CSIP report that is much longer. Obviously, that's what we mean by comprehensive. And then what we tried to do is also break this down to a snapshot view. I don't think any of the board or the audience wants me to read a 40-page slideshow. So we tried to take that, and I'll be speaking to the slideshow format. So it does not capture the totality of it, but for the purposes of a quarterly update and an annual update, that was kind of the goal mark we wanted to get to. So with that in mind, that's kind of the framework that we'll be using to discuss the CSIP. A couple other things to keep in mind. This is completing year one of a 3-year CSIP process. Both by the data, by the discussion with the team, by your participation in various events connected to the CSIP, I think you can feel very comfortable that there was solid, measurable progress across each of the 5 primary areas and the 9 goal areas. That is reinforced also by the feedback that we continue to get from DESE on the quality of our CSIP process. We were asked to be involved in some kind of guiding process for the state level about how we constructed our CSIP. So I think that reinforces the quality of the work that's being done, the care and attention but also reinforces for purpose of tonight that this is a living document and will continue to be one that we come back every quarter and update in some form or fashion. Last other quick thing before I dive into it, as we wrap this up for this year and tonight, I'm going to leave time on the back end for discussion and input, and that's really where we kind of frame where we go in for next year and start to set that tone as we creep towards the start of the school year. So with that in mind, I'm going to go through the 5 snapshots and then open that up for discussion and comments. Last thing though, I would like to say to the board members and the team, it was a lot of work initially to develop this CSIP. And I think you should take a lot of pride in the amount of diligence and effort that went into saying, this is what we're gonna prioritize, and then going out and doing that on a consistent basis. You wanna hold to that central standard of, we have goals and we are marching towards those goals. And it's important to me in this leadership role, working with all of you, the team, and the community, that when we go out and say, this is what we're gonna focus on, that we work together to keep the focus in that area. And one thing that can be a little challenging with that is there are always things that are gonna come up, and if you let those pull you off your central mission, then it becomes harder and harder to give integrity and fidelity to this process. So I think we've done an exceptional job, and I take very minimal credit in that because it's the work of the board and the work of the team and the folks out in the buildings that we're doing that. So long wind up, but we'll be a little more brief in the goals. So academic achievement, SMART Goal 1, Jen, jump in here if there's anything you want to add. Snapshot view, you can read that. You don't need me to read it to you. The 2 that I think are takeaways for me, obviously our student achievement is traditionally strong and was strong as we looked at outcomes last year. But bullet points 2 and 3 I think are particularly important and something that we talk a lot about as leadership team. We still need improved options and systems to intervene with our students at all levels. And what I mean by all levels is all competency levels. So students who are struggling, we need a way to intervene effectively with them. And students that are high achieving, consistent with our mission, we need to continue to give them opportunities to excel. One challenge within that, and this comes loud and clear through all the feedback that we look at through discussions with staff in the buildings, is that the current structure of our school day and our overall calendar makes it very difficult to deliver those supports in the buildings real time during the day. So an example that I would use is if you are a reader for us at the elementary level, we can intervene and support you through our reading specialists and our Title I programs. If you're a student in math who is having some of those same challenges, you are supported by Tier 1 instruction in the classroom and supplemental supports. But identifying ways to support those students more robustly during the school day, given our current structure, is pretty challenging. And I think that's why when we talk about things like the CSIP priority related to the multi-tiered system of supports, what we talk about with professional learning communities, and figuring out what else can we possibly do with the nature of our school day to improve those opportunities for students. That's really the takeaway from academic achievement. Jen, anything you want to jump in on that?
No, I agree with that, and I would emphasize that we see that very much at the elementary level and some at the middle school level as well.
Yeah. And I think even, conversations that I've had at the high school level, you hear this too for our high school students, say, struggling with math or working through those concepts. If we can figure out ways to alter how we set up our day so students who are at those different levels can get some more targeted supports where they need it, that's one of the things that this Nature of the School Day Committee can discuss and then decide, do we have direction to go with that? So that's a quick snapshot overview on academic achievement. Jumping down, I am now going to move to the 2 SMART goals attached to recruitment and retention. If you're looking for where your efforts paid off most dramatically as a school board, I would point you pretty closely to this. And I'll let you read through the data, but the couple that stand out to me, working on recruiting and retaining staff. You all know what we did in terms of some competitive pay adjustments to get, whether it's evening custodial folks in the doors or mechanics in the door. But what is less obvious is how that work and what you did with overall salaries helped us bring in more paraprofessionals. And that number, bullet point 2, notable decrease in resignations compared to year prior. So a 46% reduction in certified staff resignations from the year prior. I think that speaks to getting more competitive with the raise that was put into place last year. And then right alongside that, efforts about climate and culture, making people feel like we value them, that we want them here, and putting in place things to make them more likely to stay. All of those initiatives that you implemented last year, we're seeing that pay off through applications, through retaining staff. Those are really positive takeaways that I would point to. And then right behind that, I think, is that supporting action discussion as you look forward. Climate and culture goes a long way, especially for keeping people who are already kind of connected to you. Their kids go in our district, they've been here a while. But getting people in the door and then continuing to keep them really is always going to come down to competitive pay. We can be a great place to work, but if we're not competitive in our area on pay, that's going to be a struggle. And I think you've done a tremendous job as a board through work on our administrative team as well, putting together pay structures that make sense. So that's a great first year outcome. And then we need to start through efficiency in operations, continuing to figure out how we free up those dollars to make those things happen long term. I think that's going to be the real trick the next 2 years is now that the one-time money is gone, now that we've been good about getting our balances back up, now how are we strategic in using those funds to get competitive pay and keep that moving forward? So quick snapshot view on recruitment and retention. Henry, anything that you would want to add?
I'd just like to add special recognition for Dr. Amy Neal, who is a new position that the board approved going into the 23-24 school year, and this has been her primary focus, and she has championed many of these efforts. And you know, the pay has absolutely been a substantial piece of it, making that pay more competitive. But she's done a lot of the other work kind of behind the scenes that's not quite so evident, and just like to recognize her work this year in helping us in these efforts.
Jumping now to efficiency and operations and the 2 SMART goals attached to that. As we hit the snapshot view, already touched on this a little bit, and I think Brian did a nice job, and certainly following Jeff, talking about that our fiscal management, how we've handled the last couple of years, puts the district in a position to have a good financial foundation, good operating budget that is defensible to our community, and then figuring out as we start to look into the next 2 years, how do we start to use those resources. I think separately, the safety audit that's been underway and a couple members of the board participated with, I think good first year work. That's a bigger long-term focus that I think, as it kind of notes in here, also ties in with your climate and culture, but in the less obvious way with your retention of staff. People want to feel like they're coming to environments where it's a clean place to work, it's a safe place to operate, they feel comfortable in their learning and teaching environment. And I think that first wave going out through the work that Jeremy's done with that committee and the board members, putting in place that safety review for the buildings, then doing the follow-up meetings. He's been going out to the buildings and walking them through that. Little subtle things like re-examining how we're doing our vestibule setup after we've kind of seen those in operations a little bit and wanting to tweak that. We've got the pilot change in place, or we're working on getting that in place for Mount Hope for what that new platform would look like. But I think the supporting action takeaway is kind of what it says at the bottom there. All of our CSIP goals are intertwined in one way or the other. That's kind of the whole point of it. But I think these two goals most directly impact our ability to achieve success in the remaining. So if we're fiscally responsible and we continue to get competitive on pay, and we continue to have these environments and this climate and culture that is supportive, and people feel safe, then your outcome there is going to drive a lot of the outcomes, whether it's academic achievement or the work that we're doing in other areas. So, Jeremy, members of the board that worked on that committee, anything that you want to share specific to the safety audit or that I missed?
Do you have something?
I'll say, I think we definitely have a great start going with it. We've certainly found some different areas of opportunity to discuss further. And there's certainly more places to go and look at to make sure that we have the safest schools we can possibly have. And I think everyone, I know this was huge, almost, I mean, every single building had, things that they had to do for this. And so I really appreciate all the work that went into this. It really does matter.
Well, I have a couple comments to make regarding the safety audit we have, but then also, I don't know if this is the time to talk about, you said there was time in the back end.
Sure, yeah, either way.
So, I mean, for the audience, our administration team, I have a problem in the fact that we do not have school safety officers at every school. I think there's a few options that we have out there. I know that I spoke with some of the individuals on that committee about a Missouri statute that would allow school protection officers. This would be certified teachers, concealed carrying in school after rigorous training. I don't know that you're in love with that idea. So the idea that you do like is this is the Parkway School District model?
Yeah.
Parkway or Rockwood, if you could speak to them?
Correct, yeah. Rockwood and Parkway have an alternative model that they've set up. One of the things that we can discuss, and it's easy to kind of embed this within the framework of a CSIP because it goes directly to safety, is we could incorporate for the 24-25 study a review of those Rockwood and Parkway programs. What their programs look like are essentially most often retired police officers who are brought in, and they are a supplement to existing school resource officers. I think in both cases, the feedback that I've heard in conversations with them is those programs are well supported in their community. They tend to be more cost effective versus going to full-time SRO. And I think that's a prudent way for the district to look at what do these programs look like, what would be the cost involved, if that's a road that the board wants us to consider going down as part of this ongoing safety review. That's probably the direction I would lean to.
Sure. And for the public, I mean, if we went to St. Peter's and O'Fallon and said, hey, we need some more police officers, they tell us to pound sand, they don't have them, correct?
It's a very difficult recruitment area right now, and as they staff, they're staffing predominantly their road officers and then other difficult to fill positions. So I think that's in our conversations with them over time. They'd love if we scaled up, but there's also a cost that goes with that, and just the availability of their people coming through the door too.
So what I heard from Mr. Whittle is we have money, the coffers are pretty good.
They are, I mean, our budget this year is pretty close, but
Okay.
safety's
I don't
paramount,
know
yeah.
what the right motion, I would like to motion, ask my board members to give Dr. Myers, go seek out, ask questions and see if this is feasible for our district.
If you're okay, what I might suggest is we're going to bring the CSIP at the end of this for a vote. And I think if the board is so inclined, we could include, rather than a standalone motion, we could include that as a recommendation for the CSIP.
Okay.
So we would embed that as a safety portion of the CSIP, and then that can work through the committee process.
So that's a study of the CSIP update with the added study of the other districts.
Look at the financials to see if it's something we can implement.
Yeah.
Okay. I had one question for Ms. Kester. I know that whenever we were going through this audit, I think it was West High, the SRO had some issues with where his workstation was.
Yes.
Lack of visibility.
Mhm.
Are we working on that?
We are. We ran into some roadblocks. We looked at the existing construction, and it's about an 18-inch wall between the lobby area and the office that they relocated him to. So we've been discussing with Jeremy and with the staff to see if there's another place to put him to keep him more visible and not in that back office. So we are working on it, but we just haven't
Him
come out
more
as-
visible than I think his comment was that he didn't have a lot of visibility, like he was
Right.
looking through a gun slit or something.
Yeah, well, he has, yes,
Okay, all right, we're working on it, thank you.
yes.
All right, thank you all. And then jumping into our fourth area, climate, culture, and communication. Probably the bulk of the work here was through the Communications Planning Committee, and board members participated in that process as well, led by our Director of Communications, Laura Wagner. What I would point to is that bullet point 2, talking about the SWOT analysis that was done. We were also able to secure at a very, very low cost a third-party district assessment to come in and kind of tell us what we need to be focused on 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road, and fold that into the discussion within the communications committee and planning group. Also alongside of this, moving to a district level focus on Leader in Me and rolling that out. We are now in a place where, in addition to some work that was done secondary level last year, we've got 8 new schools coming online with the Leader in Me process in summer of 2024. So they've been going through that training. And what you're really looking for with that element of the programming is grassroots adoption. Leader in Me is not something you can force down people's throat. You need to start with a discussion about why it's important, let them understand the parameters around it, let them see how leadership as it relates to students is a benefit, and then move that forward. I think we've been very, very successful in both elements. Laura, anything you would want to add for the communications committee portions of this, or?
Oh, I just appreciated the communications committee time. We had great representation from the classroom to the school office to parents and administrators, and we're just really focused on systems right now. We have done a good job of keeping folks up to date with the outputs we put out there, but what we hear repeatedly from both staff and families is we want one central source. And so as we move toward the launch of our focused student information system, we're gonna have that one central source, and I think that that's really going to make things a lot easier for families to connect, not just with their kids' classrooms, but with their school and their district. So I'm excited. I know there'll be growing pains, but I'm excited.
I have a question, if I could.
Yep.
Do we know, like the first, on the snapshot view, the first bullet is this communication survey had 87.45%, gave us an A or B. Do you happen to remember what it was last year or the year before?
No, but I can look for you.
I'd just be curious to see if we stayed the same, got better. Because I know you put a lot of work into it, so I'd be interested to see.
All right.
We can get that information and share it out with the group.
But I do appreciate all the work you've done this year. I know it's a lot.
I think just last quick point on this, Laura kind of touched on it, but going back to my opening comments, when we talk about things that can pull you away from your central CSIP goals and targets, this year one implementation of Focus as our student information system is a very, very heavy lift. And we've got a team that's been working on this for the better part of a year and a half now. I think we're in a good position to be ready, but no matter how we approach this, I think it's realistic to say there are going to be learning curves, because I think everyone understands this, and I think our community understands it, but that student information system touches literally everything we do on a daily basis. How we pay and add money to our meal plans for students, going through scheduling changes, all of those things. And a lot of times, you all know from being in different environments, you come into a place that's using an existing software, and you have those kind of built-in experts that help lead you along the way. There are not built-in experts yet on this. But I really want to praise the team that has been working on this. And I know it's not visible here, but the training and onboarding plan and the thought that went into it and the process has been very systematic throughout and very gradually rolled out. So as we get into it, we'll keep those next little layers. We rolled open the first one this week. Next week's a pretty big one as well in terms of the parent and student facing side. But that's a lot of good work, and we want to get over this hump of the first 2 months of implementation as people learn it. So just kind of pointing that out quickly. And then jumping to our last area, mental health. And the bullet points you can read there, but I think you've probably heard me talk quite a bit, and certainly other folks involved at our district leadership team. District came to the board with a recommendation to strategically add mental health supports at the elementary levels and then make sure that was available at all buildings. We were able to accomplish that in essentially a 2-year period, the most impactful of that being this last year. The feedback that I hear on a consistent basis from our administrators about having that resource at every building, but also having that resource when there are district level events that you can pull more people together more rapidly, has been essential to supporting what is happening for our students, and as a result, or by proxy, helping our staff feel more supported. And if I projected this out a couple of years, that benefit is just going to increase. The longer you have those people, the more comfortable they get with our systems, they'll become more and more embedded in what happens day to day for our students. And then overall, as it relates to mental health, and kind of bringing it back to what I started off with, academic achievement, recommendations in terms of these mental health interventions, but also state mandated trainings that we have to do for students, things along those lines. Figuring out within the nature of the school day and through MTSS, where those land, how we provide those mental health interventions, those social and emotional supports for students, figuring out where to do that within the course of the day without pulling away from what we're doing on academic achievement, that's a significant challenge. And Laura, anything you want to add to that, or anything that you would want to contribute at that point? Or John?
I do feel like we've covered quite a bit on that topic. I do think one thing that has significantly contributed is the board's decision to be a leader in need district, and therefore allowing us to have our own coaches in-house. So the benefit of that is for principals to be able to work with the coach that's assigned to their building and make decisions about how that process will unfold at their particular setting, based on information that we've been able to gain from knowing our student voice. So when we're gaining information from our students and our families and our teachers, and then combining that with that individual approach at the building, has really allowed us to move forward in a way that meets the unique needs at each individual school versus having an outsider coming in and helping us determine what that would look like.
Okay. So that's my attempt to take a year of work and condense it down into a reasonable time frame for you tonight. And I appreciate the feedback, the contributions for all the members of the team, the members of the board. Just open it up. If there is any discussion or questions, we can do so. Otherwise, we would move towards an approval as discussed with the adjustments this evening.
I was just going to add real quick with like you said, how the CSIP is so intertwined together, and it's so incredibly important that as we're doing that and making the goals moving forward, that it stays that way. Because one of the big things that concerns me that when we're looking at the nature of the day, because that's something that's going to be a big undertaking, is putting in that social emotional piece, that time in the classroom, because as you guys all know, it's hard to find time to fit things in, but if kids can't control themselves and do that, there's no way they're gonna be ready to learn math and to do everything else. So it's like this double sword that has to be figured out. So it's really important to me that all this stays intertwined and that we stay focused on those, because the nature of the day isn't just about that, it's about so much more, and it affects everybody across the board, which affects behavior and safety and all of that. So I appreciate that we're doing that, and I will make sure we keep that eye on how we can get that time built into it, because I know it's challenging. So. Okay.
I appreciate that. I agree with that completely. I did have a couple questions. The first is connected to the academic achievement and supporting students in different ways. I was wondering, have we thought or looked into providing families with tools and resources to be able to support any struggling student at home and kind of go over, okay, this is what should have been covered in class today, especially if they're having a difficult time, social emotionally. But this is what you did, and the other side to give examples of how to challenge those students that, are that top side. So that maybe not necessarily in JET, but still advanced, and how, have we looked into giving parents and caregivers those tools and resources?
I think, and Jen, jump in if there's anything you'd add to this. I think the most direct answer on that is a lot of that comes out of what we would call that tier 1 level of instruction. So what that looks like as a parent is my teacher, for especially at the elementary level, but in a different way at secondary, those folks in the classroom day to day with the most direct knowledge of how that individual student is performing, they are the best informed to kind of share with a parent. And that's what it looks like most often is, hey, I noticed that Paul is struggling a little bit with this area of decoding. So here are some activities that you could do, or maybe just work on some reading together at home, in terms of that's making it very simplistic in the explanation. But that communication from the classroom teacher about just a little bit more time if you want to focus on this at night. For areas like Title I reading or a reading specialist program, it's more targeted than that. They get feedback more directly on this is how they're performing. These are the skills we're working on. This is how you can enhance and support that. So I think it's kind of more collaborative back and forth. Jen, I don't know if anything you'd add to that.
Yes, I would agree. I think there are some programs out there that are available elementary-wise. I don't know how successful maybe we are, because it sounds like...
I am hearing from parents, because I know that that's the ideal, is that a teacher would be able to go and sit down to 20 different parents and say, oh, this is what Johnny missed, this is what Sally missed, this is where I see Bob is struggling. But I'm hearing it's not happening. And so parents are feeling powerless at home to help their student, even though they're asking their student, well, what did you do? Don't you have homework today? What's going on? And then they don't find out until March or April that, oh, they're not reading. They're struggling, but they didn't know all along. And so I would love to see if that's something, because, we have an idea of where they should be with the curriculum, through each, month even, if there's just like, hey, these are resources these are the types of things your students should be seeing this month. These are resources that could help, solidify that. And across reading, math, kind of all across the board, to keep parents informed, not 100% relying on the teachers to be able to find that time for each individual student, but just an overall view. I think that could be really beneficial to parents. And again, that challenging side too, because, oftentimes if you have a student that's struggling so hard, you're not necessarily catching that, oh, they're flying through and maybe I can give them more to do. So, both sides of that, I think it's really important. It just, if that would be a possibility, if we look at what that would look like, I think that would be huge.
Yeah, I think we can definitely standardize some expectations there. From what I'm hearing, the things that you're saying, parents should know that. So it sounds like it's probably not happening.
It's not happening
across the board.
A few different different teachers, different, and it's even elementary.
All across, like, and that's part of the goal of a lot of things we're doing, is to make sure that things are being done the same across the board. I mean, obviously, they're gonna individualize it for their students, but that, so it's not completely different if somebody's talking and I'm like, I'm at this school and they don't do that at all, and I'm at this school, they don't, like, that's not what we want to hear, right?
Right.
And the other big thing is if Leader in Me is being done correctly, right? That leadership book should be coming home every night with that child, and it has their goals in it. It has all this stuff that, so the parents can look at it and see the complete snapshot of what's going on and where that child's missing, what their goals are to get better on, that they have all that, and the communication is right there. So my hope is that as we get everybody on the same page and we're doing that, that's what's going on. Because I had a child, one of my kids would tell me everything was when I had one that barely told me what was going on, and I could open that folder up and look. The teacher had things in there, it had what they were reading, it had the math stuff they were doing, it had what their scores were and what their goals were to get to, and that's where we're empowering the kids, and that's a communication tool with the parents, right? So that's where we all need to be cognizant and pull that in and get everybody doing things on the same page, so that it doesn't matter if it's your kid's school, my kid's school, or anybody else's, they're doing the same things, and we know that these tools are in place and they're being utilized. So we have a lot of this here. It's obviously not being used correctly in some areas, so that means we can do better, and that goes right into the season, so.
And I want to say that for the first example you gave as far as the students struggling, that's we have the multi-tier support. We're implementing that right now, and what that does, that actually catches them in real time. So when there is a deficit, it's called real time. We figure out why the deficit happened and what we need to do to fix it better, or just keep it from happening again, or if we need to pivot with that particular student to maybe put him or her on a different road that will in the long run catch him back up to everybody else, him or her catch them back up to everybody else. So that multi-tier system of supports, I think, will alleviate a lot of that front-end concern that you were just discussing. But as far as the advanced kids, I don't think that's going to help with that set of group of kids. But Laura can definitely tell you a lot more about that. Hate to put you on the spot, Laura. That's your baby.
It is a system that is designed for both prevention and reaction. And just as he said, it's a system that is intended for support and instruction to be provided when the student begins to struggle, so that those gaps are not quite so wide. But an important part of any program that we're going to implement is going to be partnering with families so that everyone is on the same page and the student sees that. So I made a note. I do think it's important as we move forward, and more than likely what the MTSS committee with the partnership with the buildings is going to come up with is some protocols and communication pieces and practices that are going to have to be in place to support those ongoing interventions. So I definitely agree with you. The parents are important key to that, for kids to know that we're all on the same team, as well as for that practice to happen in a variety of environments, to generalize.
I appreciate that, thank you. And then my second piece that I had, it was for the safety and security, and I know that we talked a bit about the behavioral risk assessment teams and what it would look like. So basically, Glenn Moore is the threat assessment program coordinator for the MSBA, and he offers this program to come out and for free of charge to train teachers and staff, because it's not just about the teachers, but staff as well can have input. We would need 8 to 12 per building that would have a behavioral risk assessment team. But I know that of course there'd be a cost with getting all of them trained and everything, and time and everything. But I know Melissa Tishy also took the training, and I took the training, and I mean it's really incredible, very eye-opening. I would really like to see us really take a serious look. What would it take to get teams in each middle school and each high school so that we're prepared, that we can move toward that? Like, what is it going to look like to get them trained?
And I think, that's when you kind of come back to, we completed year one, and as we walk into year two, that's a good opportunity, I think, to have that discussion within that audit group and talk about what are the financials, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. So that's probably the direction I would take it, is that committee discussion needs to include that, and then make that recommendation within that committee to go out and study it. So we can pull together all the financials. Because practically speaking, you just kind of walk back through the last 30 minutes or so of what we're looking at. That's at the core, one of these kind of core challenges here is we're talking about needing to make sure we want to stay competitive on pay. We want to be efficient in district resources. We want to look at how we build out our communications structures and build out our safety. So doing all of that collectively within the budget and the parameters that we have, that's why it's great to have the CSIP to kind of drive that focus. So we heard the focus tonight and heard the feedback, and now it's that year 2 implementation. We already kind of know what the focus is going to be, and it kind of leads into, unless there's other discussion, last year the board merged their board priorities with the CSIP, and we've had some communication. I think that marriage works very well, and I've shared kind of my thoughts as the CSIP, the focus, nature of the school day in terms of the scope and scale of work that a district can accomplish. I would suggest that that continue to be the case, that instead of having standalone board priorities, the CSIP, in my opinion, is what should drive your district, and that should be embedded in the work that the Board of Education is doing. So I think feedback on that has been supportive. That would be my intention going forward, unless I hear
I
something.
think
to
it'd
the
be
contrary.
counterproductive to have competing board priorities just kind of pulled out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We've gone through this whole process.
Yeah.
This should be our focus.
Yeah.
I do like, however, pulling out of this some highlights that kind of stand alone.
Yeah.
From the plan,
Yeah, so I think it helps, outside individuals be able to see quick, bam, 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 this is what their priority is. And even for us to have a quick go
Yeah.
through instead of, the CSIP is quite a large,
Sure.
even the summaries are a lot sometimes. But if we have a pullout that's connected, but still pulled out, simplified, I think that
Maybe a
does
special
benefit us.
emphasis on X and X in the plan.
Exactly.
Like we mentioned a couple tonight.
That's exactly, yeah.
So you could do that, right?
Yeah.
With added emphasis in these areas, they want to make sure, of all the priorities, these are even higher priorities.
These are
If
double,
you will.
these are highlighted and underlined.
But
I think that makes sense.
I think that is also a great example tonight of what a CSIP is supposed to be. You did a year, you came back, members of the board actively participated in the process, came in tonight and said, hey, I want in this focus, maybe we can kind of identify this area that we highlight, and we will do that in communications, we'll do that in other areas. But other than that, other discussion, anything else we want to hit?
I was gonna ask, was there a particular, if the board wants to look at highlighting a couple, is there a particular bullet point or goal that you'd like to add as we kind of, whatever the word we want to use?
In my eyes, we stay focused in those areas that we have our main highlights, because that's how it was all put together. But now there's another level after the studies and the things of, okay, this is what we want you to look into with safety, the things that were brought up. These are things that we want to happen with that. So that's like,
Because we know, right?
You know,
'Cause
a bullet
can't do it
point
all
under
at once,
other
we know
things.
that. This is
Right.
a 3-year plan on purpose, because you can't do all this immediately. So what do we want to bump to the head of the line? That's kind of the way I'm looking at it.
and I think that's hard to say bump to the head of the line, because they all intertwine together so much if we're doing it correctly.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think everybody this past year has this stuff, and they know this is what we need to do now in step 2, and they've gotten all the feedback that, and I think they should come back with,
So you don't
here's
like
our.
the idea of adding, personally, you don't think that's, I'm just trying.
I just don't think
respect
personally that we
board
should
members.
set up and say, this is more important than this. Because it's all so intertwined together. The nature of the day is tied to social emotional learning and a million other things with stuff with curriculum and, safety. It's
Right.
all put together. So I think if we stay focused on these things that we have here, they know we need to we're on step 2 now, this is what we need to do going forward, and then they fill that in, like last year where they said, here's our goals now with that under each of the settings, and the safety and looking at all of the things you said, that would be a goal under that heading. Does that make sense? Am I thinking it well?
I think so. So you're saying like we would stick with those 9 items that we had, and then we would just put in basically what that second step to, our second year step for those 9 areas is what you're saying?
It would be, if you remember last year's, we had our areas that were broken down, and then it had underneath, like, this is what we're gonna do.
The specific
Right,
year for
there's gonna be a
these
committee
items.
that's gonna look at this, we're gonna do this stuff. So there was a safety committee, which still should be that communication going on.
And ongoing.
But now here's our next steps. And so here's gonna be our goal in year 2 for the safety under this level, right? And with academics, Jen's got hers of here's where we were with this, here's our next step that we're gonna do with this. You have your stuff of here's where we're at, you know what I mean? That it steps it up, here's our goals for the year. Like, to me, that should be our goal for the district, so everybody can look at it at any time and say, okay, I know what they're working on. I know what Henry's goals are and what their plan is for HR. I know what academics goals are, you know what I'm saying? And it has all of that underneath it. And
Yes.
take that, and to get to those goals, you have to do the research, you have to come back with information on the cost to have, you know, retirees in there and do to have training. But it all intertwines so much because that's gonna affect Jen's budget, that's gonna affect the nature of the day, that's gonna affect, you know, because that's part, so it's all, I can't say, let's put one higher than the other, you know what I mean?
I
'Cause
get it.
it's-
I guess what I'm saying is I get that theory completely, and I agree with it, and I think the separate board priority we had in the past was not the ideal practice. But I also think in fairness to our administrative team, if there are certain things that are important to board members who have been elected and can supersede any committee they want, if with 4 of us, then I think we've got to honor that, and in fairness to them, make it clear we're gonna keep asking about this. Because if I was one of these folks, and I know at the end of the year, Mark's gonna ask me X, or Eric is gonna ask me X, I wanna be ready for it. And because there are a lot of things on this plate, you can't do them all. So there are obviously things that some of us see as our biggest priorities. And I don't think there's anything wrong with making sure that we let people know that just because that's what we're here for. I don't wanna make it complicated, but I wanna respect individual board members and their authority to do that. I think that's important, we don't lose that. That's all I'm saying.
Well, as Dr. Mayer talked about, we're going to the second year of the implementation of many things, and the committees are going to continue to meet. I think that's at the point in time where those committees, you make that a point of emphasis to really talk about in the committees. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a separate category, but we know that's things that we hate to use the word priority, but something that we really want to talk about in that aspect within your committee or within your group or within that goal. Making a separate heading or whatever, that's neither here nor there to me. I think it's, if we do have important things, now that this is our second year going into implementation, that's when we can, really focus on those. And when you're in your meetings, and then after that, come back here and we really talk about, like we've talked about that tonight. And so I think that's kind of the avenue that we need to take on that.
I don't think.
So I
think we're all basically on the same page.
But I do, yeah, I really like the fact that we need to stay focused on what
Right.
we've got.
Absolutely.
Because we're 1/3 of the way through, and we're seeing results. And I like the direction we're going, I think everybody does.
it's a
But it
living
doesn't mean that we
document.
can't,
Gotta remember that.
really
It is a
look
living
at those
document.
things hard during our committees and continue to bring those forward, like Jeff says.
And a big thing for me is I don't want any of this ever to get lost, because in the past, there would be a committee and it didn't tie into anything, right? And they would research and do things, and it was like, okay, well, here's what we found, we're gonna do this, and then it was like, okay, well, what are we gonna do with that? What's the long term, right? And I feel like everything tied with the CSIP, because it's living, and there's accountability, and it's part of our plan overall together. So these ideas are not going anywhere, they're just gonna keep continuing, we can track them, there's accountability, instead of it just being, well, let's just look into that. It's not, that like, it's in here. This is not going anywhere. It's happening, and we're gonna keep doing this, you know what I'm saying? And I think that keeps everything on point and important, because before things got lost and it wasted time. And this doesn't waste time, it keeps everybody knowing what our focus is and moving forward, and being able to evolve as we need to evolve, because it is a living document, and if you find something that, hey, I think we should look into this, we can say that and do that, instead of saying, let's put together a whole new committee and do this, because that is pointless.
Absolutely. I guess I just want to make sure that the board member knows they can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a committee may not be considering something that's important to Mark. And as a board member, it ought to at least be looked at.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure we have some avenue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, and I think that should happen all the time, because something could come up that one of us sees, like you said, or we're hearing from the community is saying, we're really seeing this as an issue, but again, it's a great thing that we can.
We know where to
exactly
send
give
it, right?
and
But we
know-
got to give them direction. Take a look at this. We know you're working. We don't want to change your life too much, but we're interested in checking this out.
Exactly.
I think that's good.
I have a question or two about with culture and climate. And I know we discussed this maybe a couple months ago. When do we lose fifth grade camp?
So technically, we still have fifth grade camp. It's just on campus.
It's on campus.
So I'm trying to think of the exact whenever.
It was COVID.
COVID.
2020.
Because the campgrounds were literally closed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they were working on them to update, because they really weren't safe for the kids to be on, and there was a lot of stuff that needed to be done. And then they didn't have enough staff to come in to do the work, and then they never got to that place.
So they're coming in now. They do it in person at the school. Is it a
We-
two-day program?
We do
or-
a 3-day on-campus program. What we did is we took the curriculum that we used at fifth grade camp, and then we modified it to bring it here at our campus. So like, the easy example I could give you is like the reptile demonstrations, the birds of prey, the orienteering, archery.
Mhm.
So
Ropes courses.
we brought those elements, they do them on campus.
Okay.
And then one of the other things that came out of that, one of the reasons, like talking about creep going back up to Quiver, they reached a point where our needs, the scale of their facilities, and being able to continue to participate, they indicated to us they could no longer host it in that fashion. So that element combined with camp at that time was a 5-week program, and it pulled like your substitutes, your nursing subs, all of those folks. I think given the way that substitute staffing is right now, it would be incredibly difficult to even attempt a program like that again. But the current program, modified, has been in place, I guess this was year 4?
Yeah.
So,
And
sorry.
The other thing that shifted over the years with it, all the people that have to go, right? Because you have kiddos now that go with special needs, so that means you have to have the paras there with them, all the cooks that have to come out there. But then you also have to replace them with subs in the schools, and it was really starting to become impossible. Plus the safety issues of all the needs of the different kids there, and having the correct staff, and even you had counselors coming from high school, which has always been a good thing, but that got harder. Plus now you introduce, you can't tell them to keep their cell phones, because that's part, right?
God forbid.
So there's a whole other, there's a lot, it's a lot more complicated than it needs to be, unfortunately. Our world is different, so.
Just pure numbers.
And I can tell you, I'm talking with the Boy Scouts of America about different opportunities, but it wouldn't be school-driven, it would be individual-driven. Because, I mean, you're familiar with BSA just like I am, and you know it's different out there in the wilderness. And to think of one teacher, 20 students in the wilderness, that would never happen. That would never fly by BSA standards. So there's just different standards, and families could potentially meet those standards, but as a school, it's just too challenging in this day and age to be able to do something like that.
Could we have a program like that in secondary? Somewhere around the freshman year, maybe second semester, some sort of a leadership multi-day program? I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about racism and bullying. I mean, is that a program that could bring people together that they can continue the next 3 years of their high school education? I mean, well,
I think
I know you got Leader in Me.
yeah.
I
think you kind of have a couple of different things at the high school level, Leader in Me being one. The difference, Leader in Me at the high school level versus elementary is it is even more student-driven. So once we are able to implement that at the high school level and add that to what we do with PPI and then our other student leadership opportunities, again, I don't know the logistics of trying to create a camp program. We do have leadership classroom classes that we go through. But I think that kind of, to me, is you're talking about leadership development through an existing CSIP and board program. I'd maybe want to see that get its feet under it a little bit and then see, does that turn into, for all the lighthouse leaders at the high school level, those student leaders come together for a leadership building opportunity once a year. It's kind of embedded already in the structures of Leader in Me, but you could look at how to make that more robust. That'd be one option, I think.
And the high school still do the freshman orientations.
Anything else? If not.
So how do we formally add, my thoughts about commissioning Dr. Myers to pursue the Rockwood plan for school protection officers, or school resource officers specifically?
I wrote down something, see if you think it does what you're saying, Mark, and if you think it's okay, Erica. Approve CSIP update, the recommendation could be something like this: approve the CSIP update with a request for the appropriate committee, already in structure happening, to consider feasibility of adding school protection officers at all schools. So they know this is an expectation. That committee, whatever that committee is appropriate to do, we're going with
Is
it.
everybody okay with that?
I think that
Is
will work.
Is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so I need a motion to approve the continuous school improvement plan update as presented with the addition of, with the current, go ahead and read that again.
Yes,
You wrote it.
approve current CSIP update with a request for the appropriate committee to consider feasibility of adding school protection officers at each school.
Make a motion on that.
All right, Mr. Pratt, can you get a second, please? Mr. Christopher, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right, new business, please.
All right, first item under new business, annually we bring you the agreements and partnership agreements from the local law enforcement agencies that support our school resource officers. So tonight we have City of St. Peter's SRO partnership agreement for review and approval. O'Fallon is working on an update for theirs. We're reviewing it as well. So their agreement has some minor tweaks that we're walking through. So we'll have that one in August. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise we just ask for that approval.
Any questions? All right, if not, I need a motion to approve the 24-25 City of St. Peter's SRO partnership agreement as presented. Mr. Helms, second. Mr. Pratt, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, thank you. Next item is the 24-25 substitute teacher pay plan. Dr. St. Peter has prepared this tonight. He's going to walk us through the
Thank you, Dr. Myers. Good evening, members of the board. You have in your board documents a memo from me with a recommendation for a substitute teacher pay plan for the 2024-2025 school year. It's an area we've continued to struggle in really for the last 4 to 5 years since pre-COVID. And we've really kind of gathered a lot of research. We've gathered information from surrounding districts around us, and including in the St. Louis area. Gotten feedback from our current subs and other administrators and other sources of information to kind of come up with this plan. The reality of it is when we are not able to adequately staff our buildings with substitute teachers, it places a real great burden on the building. And it makes everything else, a lot of the things that we're talking about here tonight embedded with our CSIP, it makes it really difficult to be able to keep moving forward. and improvement. So, this plan, I've laid out what our current substitute teacher pay rates are for the 23-24 school year, and then what the recommendations are moving forward. Our greatest area of need has really been that day-to-day position that we have trouble filling. No Mondays and Fridays, just the random absences that seem to come up. We've really struggled to fill those positions, and that's where that burden really then kicks in on the building. To come up with some other alternative means to try to cover that class so that instruction can continue. Through the research, through gathering the information, the biggest changes would be increasing that daily substitute teacher pay rate to $150 a day. You have the data on what current and known rates are for some commensurate school districts around us. This would put us very competitive, I feel like, within those comparative data points. Some tweaks to the other pieces of the program compared to what we've had in prior years, but keeping our permanent building substitutes in place with the addition of some paid time off, which presently they don't have, so it's a no work, no pay situation. This just allows 5 days of paid time off. And then adding in a teacher of record stipend, and this is just acknowledgement that when we have a long-term absence for maternity leave or teachers out for an extended leave of absence, that substitute, we're asking them to take on some additional duties. And this allows for some additional compensation to compensate for just that, which would be grading papers, making contact with parents, staying after school for faculty meetings and things like that. This just allows for that appropriate compensation mechanism to then kick in. We, as I've outlined in the memo, we have paid pretty handsomely when we are unable to fill positions. Our go-to is to pay teachers on plan, particularly at the secondary level, the middle school and high school. We paid last year almost $500,000 for that. Our hope is that if we can better attract, recruit, and retain substitutes to fill these positions, we'll have less of that to encumber, and so that number will go down. We realize that this cost is going to be an increase because we are pretty substantially increasing money. However, that has been incorporated into the budget. Jeff Orr worked with that and worked with Brian as we were putting these final pieces together, but Jeff incorporated an increase such as this to when he was building the 24-25 budget. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but that is the recommendation to approve this substitute teacher pay plan.
I like it. Glad to see us getting competitive.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Right. If there are any other questions, comments, I need a motion to approve the 24-25 substitute teacher pay plan. Dr. Marion, second. Mr. George, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Next item, we're staying with extra
Okay.
care, extra pay, extra duty task force.
So the board approved the request to have the extra pay, extra duty task force meet to hear numerous requests from coaches and sponsors for point adjustments. This is all outlined in our board policy, that this process is articulated. We did meet with the task force. Just as a refresher, that task force consists of our 4 high school activity coordinators and 4 teachers appointed by the FZEA. We spent the better part of 2 days, June 3rd and June 5th, hearing these requests, deliberating on them, and then coming to consensus within that committee on those requests. And the information that you have is a summation of the recommendations from that committee to incorporate these changes. This has become certainly an annual occurrence, and it is a little, just for frame of reference sake, it's less of a monetary impact for 24-25 than it was for 23-24. But the reality of it is we still have a great number of these positions that really have not been adjusted in years and years and years, and even the ones that you have before you in this recommendation, many have not been adjusted in any form of history that we have recorded, some 20+ years, some even more than that. So there is a total price tag that's associated and estimated with this recommendation, and that is substantial. But I think one of the common themes that we heard in this task force is that particularly our coaches at the high school level feel that they're not adequately compensated when we look at comparable districts around us. So we have not studied that. We have lived within our own process and our own procedures for the time that I've been in this position. We've not looked outside. We do that a lot with all of our other positions. We look at how are we competitive, are we comparable in other positions. We haven't really done this particularly in the terms of with our high school coaches. And so my recommendation, my ask is that you approve this recommendation, but that also, barring any thoughts to the contrary, that we be allowed to go out and just take a look and see how do we compare with particular our coaching salaries. Look at our policy, look at our procedure. There are some, it's a good system, but I think there are some things that we can do to tweak it. We would not make any changes, of course, without bringing that back to you for approval. So this would just be approving these recommendations as presented, but then also giving us permission to go out and just kind of take a look and see how do we compare. What is our process? What are our salaries compared to other districts? So that's kind of a two-pronged recommendation.
Questions,
Comments, I would say I know how arduous this task is and what it takes to even come up with the recommendations you have here, so thank you.
Yeah.
It's not the most fun thing to do in the world.
Yeah.
And most likely going out and studying, you're gonna create more work for yourself.
Probably so, yeah.
Thank you for enduring this.
That's okay. That's okay. It's, recruiting and retaining staff in all
It's all
positions
part
is
of
a
it.
key, and what a great way to, you talk about culture and climate of a school, getting kids connected in things outside of what they're learning from 7:30 to 2:30, just
And we
helps.
want them to be our teachers if possible.
Right.
We have to pull people from other districts and outside. It works, it's not ideal, so the better we can, the more fair we can be with our own folks and entice them to be, that's gonna be our best relationships we can have with kids, so that's ideal.
And it's far time that you look at the process.
It is.
of How it's
Absolutely.
being
It's
done,
well-
because I think that's gonna help. The way it is now just doesn't make logical sense in a lot of ways, so I'm excited for you to do that.
Yeah, we'd like to be able to get some folks together, coaches and activity coordinators, and take a good look at it.
Yeah. All right, any other
I
questions or
don't wanna
comments?
be in that committee.
Okay.
Just for the record.
If not, I need a motion to approve the extra pay, extra duty task force recommendations as presented. Mr. Christopher, second. Mr. Helms, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Last item, also same with Henry, just a quick update, supplemental bus driver pay plan adjustment.
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Myers, and you have a memo from Aaron Williams in your board packet of information. This is a recommendation to increase our supplemental bus driver hourly rate of pay from $20 an hour, as it has been for quite some time now, up to $25 an hour. These are our folks that we pull in off the bench when we need somebody to pinch hit, when we have a short-term absence, we have a particular run or an evening activity that we can't fill, we would ask a supplemental bus driver, they're in effect substitutes for us, to come in and help out. Years ago, that number that we had on the bench was 20 plus, and we had a good access and good availability to have those folks come in and help out when we needed some help. That number's dwindled down to about 4 over the course of the years. And again, it's like other things we've talked about, the lack of competitive pay has been a deterrent for them. So we would like to bolster that up to $25 an hour. These employees do not receive benefits. They don't receive a reasonable assurance of a minimum number of hours per week that they'll work, but they work on them as needed and as they're willing and interested and able to work. So by increasing this from 20 to 25, we think we'll be better able to recruit staff to fill this. This is a relatively nominal increase to our operating expense, but will help us build tremendously in our transportation department.
Questions, comments?
I do have something. I know for the substitute pay, you all had kind of a loyalty incentive.
Mhm.
Have you all ever thought about something like that for for bus driver, for the substitute bus drivers and what that would look like?
Yeah, we did have that for our substitute teachers, thank you, and.
It was awesome.
Yeah, yeah, we think that's made an impact. We have not necessarily looked at it for these supplemental bus driver positions, but those are things that we can absolutely look at. We've had a group get together and kind of brainstorm some ideas, and this was one of the first foremost options that came up, was increasing that supplemental pay rate. But I think there are always things like that that we can look at to kind of tweak what our plan and further incentivize folks to help us out.
If there are any other questions, I need a motion to approve the supplemental bus driver pay plan as presented. Motion. Ms. Byrd, second Mr. Helms. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have comments from the board. We'll start with Mr. Pratt.
Sure, okay. Well, Mr. Whittle, thank you for getting your presentation put together for us today from the financials. Your first time, good job. District administration team, thank you for getting everything organized for us for CSIP. And certainly looking forward to seeing what your findings will be over the next few months with Rockwood about the SROs in our schools. And then last but not least, just props to our custodians who are stripping and finishing floors, getting schools ready for the the next school year. I hope to God we're leaving the air conditioning on for them. Where are we at?
Ms. Byrd?
I'll repeat much of what he said. Great job with your first presentation. I really appreciate all the details and percentages and graphs and whatnot. And yes, special thank you to the custodians and admins who are getting the buildings ready and plans together for teachers and students to join us soon.
Soon, very soon.
So all the stuff that they said already, so I'm on board by repeating that again. But I do want to take a moment to give a shout out to Miss Kist. Is it Jennifer Kist? She's the early childhood special education teacher of the year for 2024. She's among 10 teachers to be named the St. Louis Regional Teacher of the Year honorees. They'll be celebrated on August 12th at a banquet along with their peers, school administrators, and family members. Teacher of the Year will be announced in October. So for those of you who want to participate, support Ms. Kiss, there you go. Thank you to the admin though, like everybody, like they said before me. Thank you to admin, teachers, parents as well, and more importantly, the students. So it was a great year. Looking forward to next year and having this meeting again next year. So I'm looking forward to all the progress that we're making and is yet to come. So I'll end with that.
Mr. Christopher?
Yeah, also want to say thanks to everybody involved in that CSIP. It's a huge undertaking. People don't realize that, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's going to continue to help us guide the district where we want it to go, and I like that we've put our priorities together with that. Just thanks for all the hard work, teachers. I hope that you're getting plenty of rest and taking some time off to rejuvenate. And thank you for this past year, and look forward to working with you come fall, come August, and get ready. And also want a little shout out to the golfers and the sponsors and all the volunteers of the 2 golf tournaments that we had. Both of them was huge success. One was for Special Olympic athletes in our district, and that was out in Incline Village. Great time, great group of people. Then the second was Grow Your Own Teacher organization. That's know about that program. That's for the selected alumni to be able to come back and get some help and come back and teach for us. But great tournament there as well. I wish I'd have played better in both. But I just think they're a good thing, and talk about culture and different things. That a lot of people from every type of job in the district, comes out to these tournaments, and it's great to see them outside of the school setting. So applaud everybody that did that.
Mr. George?
Yeah, the summer's gonna come to an end here pretty quick. We'll be back in school. Thanks for the CSIP. That is probably, like you said, the bulk of our meeting was about that, and a lot of the good hard work went into that. And a shout out to the admin team that's worked hard all summer, making us look good. Thank you very much. That's it.
Yeah, I would echo all of those statements, obviously. I appreciate everybody, I think, being focused on the right things. You know, that's across the board. And I do think also that you mentioned the summer's coming to home. We don't want to really face that, mostly teachers and students, and I get it. But speaking of that, our Back to School Bash is on August 7th. That helps connect families with the community resources. So we hope to publicize that. I know Mrs. Wagner will be working on that. But everything about back to school, all the information anybody could want can be found on our website now. It's up and running. So you have a question about the start of school, that's where to go. So thank you, Mrs. Wagner, for getting that put together. Nice laptop, I like the bigger screen, easier for me to see. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
It's dry.
It is so far.
Along with the back to school, I know parents and kids have heard about us moving to Focus, a new platform. So Tyler will not be around anymore, but as Dr. Myers said, it is a huge undertaking, and JB, thank you. Please tell your team thank you. You guys, I have gone above and beyond, and we see it, and we truly, truly appreciate you. I've seen a lot with this program, and I think it's gonna be really awesome for our families. It's much more user-friendly. Parents can see a lot more, interact with the teachers. And another thing I really like about it is it puts everything in one place. Instead of there being a bunch of different apps, that one teacher using this, one teacher using that, they don't have to have that anymore. And the families know where to go for information, how to get it. It's available on the websites, but it's gonna be, they'll get a web or an email with the information. So look for that. Don't try to go in there early because they're still getting everything rolled out. But you'll get an email, and then you'll fill out all your back to school documents with that. So keep an eye on it. Check your junk mail. It should be coming out here soon. So, and like everybody else said, thank you all so much for everything you do. You guys are really the best. I just think the world of all of you. So hope you guys have a great summer. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Dr. Marion, Mr. George, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right. Thank you.